Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs around the internet, including Cover 32 and Cold Omaha, along with more podcasts than we have time to mention. He is useful human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing in this wonderful day of free agency?
It's hectic, man. I've had to move stuff today and also keep up with all the free agent signings. Not a fan. Just a bad day to move stuff.
I feel like that was a poor choice of planning on your part.
It's entirely my fault.
Yeah. There's no excuse for planning things around yesterday and today. If you're planning on going to the gym, you at least have your phone on you. But if you are planning on trying to find out what is happening with, say, Tremaine Brock, because that's something that's important, you have to have your phone on you at all times.
Right.
So,
oh, well.
Yeah, well, we may get a compensatory pick out of that. Good for him in Denver. Good for him. So, welcome to this episode. We are recording this on Wednesday at approximately 1:49 in the afternoon, which means news will break during this show, which will be fun, and that part of the show may not be as relevant as it may be afterwards. So we're going to try to keep this as up-to-date as we can as far as stuff, and we're going to try to be as try to report on things that have already happened. Now, if something happens between now and Thursday when Kirk Cousins goes to Manny's and slips on the ice and destroys his ACL, that will change the content of this episode. But for here on out, we are as up-to-date as humanly possible. Go team! So if you have enjoyed our show previously, if you enjoy the show moving forward, please feel free to give us a small donation to help keep the lights on and help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. You can do so at paypal.me/NorseCode or patreon.com/NorseCode and become a sustaining member and give one to whatever amount of money you would like to give a month and just help us keep the lights on, help us pay for things like storage and things like that. We are planning on doing a little bit of a giveaway with our Patreon people here in the next month or so, so keep your ear out for that. So, all of the little shilling aside, let's get straight into our big news story, which is Kirk Cousins is expected to be the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings for, as the Daily Norseman put it, the gross national product of Haiti. It's a lot.
It's not small. The thing that gets me the most is that, it's a fully guaranteed contract for 3 years. And I'm kind of surprised. I'm actually really surprised. One of the things that I was kind of bagging on the report from the Chris Cooley, right? It was 3 years, $91 million fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
Was that the 3 years, 91? Yeah, it seems like too much. But that happens sometimes. It's the fully guaranteed that I absolutely don't believe. And then, of course, it ends up getting reported that he did get a fully guaranteed contract for $7 million less than was reported by Chris Cooley. But that's just astounding to me. Someone had asked earlier. I think they asked the other podcast that I'm on, which whatever, I'll answer it here. Hey, that doesn't seem like that unusual because only 3 years are guaranteed. A lot of these contracts are 5 years, or the first 3 years are effectively guaranteed. So it's not really that different, is it? That's actually not the case. The only other contract that's guaranteed fully through 3 years was Ndamukong Suh's contract, and Miami tried to get out from under it a couple of times and they couldn't. So
I was gonna say, almost immediately they tried to do something there and were unable to do so.
Right. So, no, that's pretty unusual. You usually have 2 years or more, even more often than that, a year and a half fully guaranteed with roster bonuses that become guaranteed on the fourth day of the league year. But teams typically don't constrain themselves that way, even for quarterbacks. So that is unusual. Yeah.
It's worth mentioning that it's hard because it's watching the team, because you have two big pieces of two big points of view on this. First off is that the Vikings are doing this. This is a play of we are all in. This is a play of we have all of the pieces. We need the star quarterback. Let's run. Which can be terrifying if you're looking at any sort of future prospects of things. But on the other side of it, there is this sense of, wow, the Vikings were actually willing to go out and pay for the number one free agent that was available. That's kind of unusual.
It is, and a lot of people say that the Vikings don't take big swings in FA, and I think that used to be true. I think that's not quite as true anymore. They tried to go after Ricky Wagner. That didn't work out. They did go after Alex Boone. That worked out. They tried to go after, I think they tried to go after Mike Upati, and that didn't work out. I actually don't remember if they actually were in the market for Upati. They tried to go after Alshon Jeffrey. That didn't work out. So, sometimes they do attempt some of these big swings, but I think, and that's been truer recently, but I think they've been kind of all in for a little bit. The first and fourth for Sam Bradford, for example, I think is another indication that they were kind of all in. That didn't quite work out. So yeah, I mean, they've been all in for a while. I think they recognize that they're kind of at the peak in terms of overall team talent, that they can really exploit. So yeah, no, it makes sense that they kind of swung for the fences here. It is kind of, disappointing from the perspective of they're not that confident in Teddy Bridgewater's knee, because I think that's what did it. I don't think it's a talent evaluation of Teddy based off of what I've heard, but that's all pretty circumstantial. Maybe it's a combination of, they don't think Teddy's as talented as Kirk, plus the knee, and plus, all that. So yeah, it might be a combination of all three. But I think that. Yeah, I think that this is a signal that they perceive a window. They also think that this doesn't really impact their long-term sustainability too much. I mean, obviously it does a little bit because it's a pretty big contract. But
it is for 3 years, and that is worth noting. It's not like we put ourselves in a situation of being married to him for 5. This is for 3, which is a much shorter deal.
Yeah, exactly. But the issue, of course, is that 3 fully guaranteed versus 5 that's not fully guaranteed. I mean, there is some commitment at that point, but yeah, I mean, it's unlikely that the Vikings wouldn't have paid out the third year of a 5-year contract. It's just, if Cousins kind of lives down to what his detractors are saying, is kind of like, this is the worst of Cousins. He, has a turnover problem and stuff like that. Then by year 3, you do know if you want to keep him, and now you don't get to make that choice. But yeah, if they are unimpressed basically with Cousins, they can kind of load a bunch of contracts into, and it was at 2022, right? Because he's signed through 18, 19, and 20, so 2021, and kind of just deal with that then. But yeah, it doesn't cripple the Vikings too much, especially because I guess they're getting a lot of compensatory picks in this round of free agency for the 2019 draft.
It's almost astonishing at this point, the number of compensatory picks we have.
It's an unusual feeling, isn't it? That doesn't seem right.
Considering that all 3 quarterbacks that played for us this year are no longer on our team, yeah. And the person making the least amount of money out of it is Teddy with a $5 or $6 million, and we'll get to him in a moment. But no, that's interesting anyway. Someone on Twitter had made a comparison that we haven't had a big body young star quarterback like this since the days of Dante Culpepper. Would you say that is an accurate comparison on something like that, or?
I don't think that Cousins draws the kind of respect that Culpepper did. So it's not, I don't think it's really quite the same.
Well, do you think that's a situation of where he was playing and the crazy ownership and things that led to him ending up starting? Or do you feel like that has something to do with his play?
I think it's a bit of both. Like, I think the fact that the owners sabotaged the team in Cousins' final year, owners / FO / politics / coach sabotage the team, and it's the Redskins, right?
He's got the tattoo on his butt. He has a tattoo of that logo somewhere on him.
But yeah, the sabotage of the team last year, I think, plays a role. But I mean, also, I think, like I mentioned, he's got the turnover problem. I think he leads the league over the past 2 or 3 years in fumbles plus interceptions, which I think is a little bit of a misleading stat. But I'll get to that in a second too. But also, I mean, I think people have like consistently not believed in Cousins. I'm one of them. Where people were insisting that he'd be better than RG3, and I was like, that's just silly, that's ridiculous. And then RG3 like died essentially, and then Cousins played pretty well for a while, and so I had to be like, well, yeah, I guess he's fine. But then statistically, he was like a top 4 quarterback or top 5 quarterback, like in 2016, and at that point you're just like, dude, what is happening, right? Because it just doesn't feel like a good estimation of his abilities, right? Because you could. In 2016, probably name 5 quarterbacks that you liked more than him, that you thought were better, right? Like Matt Ryan in 2016, I think Russell Wilson, obviously Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. It's Drew Brees, right? And then you're at 5. And so it's just weird that he put up those numbers statistically. And I think that disconnect between what his perceived level of talent, which may not have actually caught up to what his actual level of talent is. I'm going to do a deeper, I guess, film dive later to try and figure all that out. That disconnect between his perceived level of talent and the numbers that he put up, even in just rate statistics, it has kind of, I think, bugged our understanding of who he is. And so, no, I don't think people think of him as a star quarterback, even though in 2016 he kind of put up star quarterback numbers. So I don't think it's an accurate comparison, but, it's maybe the first time the Vikings have gone after a big money quarterback, which I think is a different thing, but gone after a big money quarterback since I guess you could say Favre, but really since Culpepper.
Yeah, you could say Favre but in the case of like a younger quarterback who isn't at the very edge of his career. I do think it's funny that the same people who were anti the Favre signing were all about Drew Brees at that particular moment. Like when there was discussion about the potential of bringing in Brees, you go, holy cow, this might actually happen. This might actually happen. Be like, yeah. Everybody who's saying this was also going, are they really sending people down there to try to coax him out of retirement? Oh, Jared Allen has joined them too? Okay, right on. I'm sure he and the punter are going to have lots of things to talk about.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure they'll get lots of lawn tips as to how Brett is keeping things up to snuff there.
Right.
Just a brief thing on Breeze, since I brought it up here. It wasn't going to happen, but it was a nice thought, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fun, right? And I thought it was kind of funny that now people are talking about the Vikings and Breeze, which is just, he's going to turn 40 this year, and I was like, oh, that's so perfectly Vikings. Like, how many 40-year-old quarterbacks have they had? Like, a ton, right? And so I tweeted something out like, oh, it'll be really funny when Drew Brees becomes the next in a surprisingly long line of 40-year-old Hall of Fame bound quarterbacks, right? Because you can even go back to like Warren Moon, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not an unusual thing. But then after, and so that tweet got a bit of traction. It was like 70 retweets, right? And then after he signed a 2-year, actually really friendly deal, I think, for the Saints, $50 million contract, a bunch of Saints fans found the tweet and they were like, haha, you were wrong. And I was like, I wasn't really intending to. Are you, what? No, that wasn't.
Like, haha, you took that seriously.
And they were like, yeah, I could delete this. And I was like, I was making fun of the Vikings, but okay, you're all having fun. Like a ton of Saints fans.
Yeah,
and then I tweeted out like, "Wow, I can't believe he only signed for like $25 million." And then Saints fans found that and they were like, "He's mad." And I was like, "Why? What do you think I'm mad?"
There's a report out there that a team, and you could say presumably the Vikings, had put an offer out there for $30 million, and there's reports disputing this. I fully believe that the Vikings could have pitched that if we're willing to go 27 for 3 years with Kirk Cousins, it wouldn't be totally out of the realm of possibility to go, so 30.
Yeah, no, it would totally not shock me if the Vikings pitched $30 million, and it makes all the sense in the world for him to turn that down, right? Aside from the fact that taxes kind of eat up some of the difference, right? Because I think Louisiana has like half the tax rate in the highest bracket than Minnesota does, and they travel to states that have like smaller, right? Because the Saints, they go to North Carolina and to Florida, obviously, and Georgia. They tend to travel to states that have lower tax, and so taxes tend to even out some of it, and then you have to factor in freaking moving all the way to freaking Minnesota. How much are you willing to pay to live in the city that you lived in all your life versus a city that you don't even like? Yeah, well, if you've got 30 million, probably a lot.
It keeps you a little bit warmer.
Right.
It helps buy the ointment for the scar on your face. I did like the idea that in the NFC North, you could have, if you were scheduled to play the NFC North that year and you were outside of the division, you go, okay, well, we're playing Aaron Rodgers this year, we're playing Matt Stafford this year, and we're playing Drew Brees this year. Oh no! Well, at least we'll get a week off when we play Trubisky.
Right, yeah. But I mean, look at who the Bears have signed, right? They got Allen Robinson and Trey Burton, and I think they even got another weapon too, which he's just oh wow, he's gonna have enough people to throw to, right? Because he's got Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard and Cameron Meredith is going to be healthy again.
Yeah,
and
it's
Allen
not like last year
Burton.
when they didn't have anyone to throw to. It's like you were better off throwing to your offensive lineman and taking the penalty than getting the pick.
Right. Yeah, exactly. This was throwing to the ghost of Kendall Wright, who actually, if the Vikings sign Kendall Wright, I'll take that back because I actually don't hate him. But
instead of the ghost of, he'll be the corpse of. That's the improvement on that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at that point,
Trubisky walked into that situation seeing that, everyone had left and the place was on fire and going, well, the fire doors here are nice. This place is stable.
Yeah, right. And then Josh Sitton left, and you're just wow, what's happening? But yeah, I guess things are hunky dory over in Chicago. So yeah, it's going to be a fun division from an offensive perspective, and it's nice to be probably the only team with a good defense in the division. I guess we'll see what Patton does in Green Bay, because I mean, there's talent there, right?
Yeah, we'll see what the draft does there, but
right,
real curious on that. But back to Kirk Cousins for a moment. We've talked the last couple episodes, we've spoken the last couple episodes about his play, and an article had come out about the RPI, about the play with DeFilippo and Kirk Cousins. Do you feel like this is a proper fit?
I don't think it's an improper fit, right? I don't know exactly what a DeFilippo offense is going to end up looking like. If I go all the way back to the Cleveland Browns with Josh McCown, I mean, that's an offense that ran through its tight end, right? But that makes sense. The tight end was better than everyone else, right? Because Josh Gordon was suspended. They hadn't, drafted Corey Coleman yet. And so, they were left with, I don't know if they had Kenny Britt at the time. But they had Brian Hartline as their top target. I think he got the most targets that year, which it's Brian Hartline. And Travis Benjamin was another one, and it's that or Gary Barnidge, and it turned out to be Gary Barnidge. So that offense is not a good analog for the kinds of pieces that the Vikings have, and so you can say the Vikings are probably going to end up being a play action heavy team, and Cousins does, pretty well in play action. He's got, the kind of aggressiveness that you want from a play action quarterback, as opposed to someone like Jared Goff did well in play action, but I think that they could have done a lot more if he was an inherently more aggressive quarterback. I think that that's a good example of how it could be a good fit. DeFilippo said that they were going to keep a lot of the elements that worked in this offense. That means probably isolating Stephon Diggs. They did that a lot, especially in the second half of the year, and running combination routes to get Adam Thielen open. I can't imagine that they'll stop doing that. And so, Cousins should be fine. I think that does mean you're probably going to lean more towards Stephon Diggs targets this year than Adam Thielen. But I mean, who cares? They're both good, right? I guess if you're a fantasy player, that kind of information ends up being pretty important. But that's just me guessing, so I wouldn't take that as gospel either. But yeah, I think that when it comes to outside the numbers, accuracy to the middle of the field, Cousins does fine there. That's just kind of my evaluation of Cousins overall. Is like he's fine. And so he's going to fit most systems unless the system explicitly like requires that the quarterback run a lot, right? Like if you put him in like, the system that they've got running for Cam Newton in Carolina, and just take away all the runs, I mean, he would probably do, fine, but probably not great because of the receiver talent and, the running back room, the running room that they give those running backs. But he would do about as well as any quarterback in that system would do, right? Unless it's someone like Cam Newton, right? You put him in the Patriots system, I think he would do fine. He's a fine quarterback that's very dependent on the team talent around him, and the Vikings have a lot of team talent. I think that he's a good fit for the system, and I think that DiFilippo is going to fit the system around the kinds of talent that they have. Like he is a little bit turnover prone. I'm going to see, how much of that's decision making related. I'm a little bit worried about his play under pressure. And so deeper dropbacks, which are not a hallmark of what the Eagles did, not a hallmark of what the Vikings did last year, and not that big of a hallmark of what the Browns did. Those deeper dropbacks are probably harmful, and he doesn't have to worry about that. So from that perspective, it's a fit. We'll see. And I have to do deeper breakdowns on Cousins from a trait perspective and DiFilippo from a scheme perspective. But I feel like those kinds of breakdowns are not going to be all that useful projecting forward, given the different kind of environment that the Vikings are.
So would you say you're optimistic about the fine quarterback?
He's fine. I'm not pessimistic. Like
that is the most ringing endorsement that Arif Hassan is able to give to any human being, really.
People keep asking me how I feel about the Cousins thing, and I'm so like I can't be bothered to respond. Like that's how I feel about Cousins. Like, yeah, he's there. It doesn't bother me. Like a lot of people are really pissed off, and I'm not, right? Like, and maybe it's because I had like time to prepare because I knew the Vikings were going to be in on Cousins for like a while now. Ever since Adam Thielen like said at the Super Bowl, like, yeah, Kirk Cousins is out there. I'm like, oh well, I guess this is happening.
I guess this is going to end up being a thing. And in the first show that we talked about it, we weren't even taking it terribly seriously.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Last episode was so we might need to prepare ourselves for this. So I feel like the Norse Code listeners have been preparing themselves for this through us. We're trying to get you ready for the eventuality of a good portion of our cap disappearing.
I like the idea that we're like primarily responsible for the emotional health of our listeners.
That might be more true than we'd like to let on.
Get help.
We are your support system. You should probably seek therapy.
But yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I've just gotten acclimated to the idea. I mean, like the 1 to 3 odds in Vegas that the Vikings were going to sign Kirk Cousins after the combine. Like, okay, yeah, I guess it's happening. So yeah, if I had any strong emotions, they've kind of played out. I've kind of developed a bit of a trust for the Vikings' ability to evaluate quarterbacks, which is what a weird thing.
That's not a sentence I would have said 10 years ago. I don't think I would have said it 8 years ago.
It's like, yeah, the Vikings, they've got a really good track record with quarterbacks. Like, what? Yeah, they do.
As evidenced by this offseason, I suppose.
Right? Like, you can get a net comp picks out of all 3 of those quarterbacks. But yeah, so I guess from that perspective, like, yeah, they overpaid him. In my estimation, they overpaid him by $6-7 million a year. That's a lot of money. That's enough to secure a free agent, right? That's enough for a pretty good player. And half the amount for like a really stellar player, like what Allen Robinson went for like 14, didn't he? Something like that, maybe 12. But yeah, so I mean, the $7 million, it's not nothing, but like I kind of also acknowledge that like when you sign external free agents versus internal free agents, and I guess technically the Vikings haven't signed him yet, but when you sign external free agents as opposed to internal free agents, yeah, you're going to pay more. Maybe not this much more, but you're going to pay more. When it's a quarterback, maybe even more. So yeah, they overpaid him in my estimation, but like look, all the quarterbacks are overpaid. Sam Bradford's overpaid. Keenum is overpaid, although he went closer to what I expected. or closer to what I would have paid him than I expected. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, Drew Brees is the only one that's not overpaid. So yeah, he got overpaid. That sucks. He's not worth the amount of money that they gave him, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be an asset to the team, right? I mean, like Kyle Rudolph's overpaid, and no one's really complaining about that because he does clearly provide value to the team. So it kind of doesn't matter. Like the Vikings are balancing that out with a bunch of underpaid players like Stephon Diggs, and Anthony Barr and Eric Hendricks, who, when it comes time to figure out how much to pay them, yeah, you're gonna have to pay the piper and have to figure that out, and you're probably gonna lose one or two. But the Vikings are balancing out their overpaid players with underpaid players, and if they continue to find underpaid players, the amount by which they overpaid Kirk Cousins is not going to be the problem if there is a problem. It's going to be Kirk Cousins being less than fine.
Well, let's talk about the other deals that have involved Vikings quarterbacks. Let's talk about Case Keenum to Denver for $18 million. Here is my question. Where do you think the Vikings would have stood on a Case Keenum to Minnesota re-signing? $18 million obviously being too much, but do you think there was any sort of wiggle room in his mind?
Yeah, I think so. So I think part of it is not so much the cost as much as the opportunity to grab Cousins. So if they could get Case Keenum for $2 million, they still would have gone after Cousins, right? I think that Mike Zimmer's opinion on Case Keenum, a very strong opinion, that just comes out during pressers about how he was born with a horseshoe around his neck. Like, I think their idea of him as a starter just makes them nervous. I don't think there's a cost associated with him that would automatically they'd be okay with not just signing him, but making him the starter. So I think, if he costs $16 million or whatever, or $6 million, I think that wouldn't have stopped them from trying to get a better solution. But when you do go above $10 million, it restricts your ability to get that better solution. So they wouldn't have signed him for $10 million and grabbed Cousins. But if they missed on Cousins, say Cousins went to Denver instead, then I think they would have been able to sign Keenum for 17, right? Like, I don't think it would have been kind of out of their ballpark. Like, I think they would have been okay valuing him there.
Playing a bit of a dangerous game here, but if you're going to go that route, and that phrase sounds better if you use the Sean Connery / Bane accent.
Yeah, I guess. I think part of it is that every kind of option is fraught with risk, right? And this is what I'd said a couple of days ago on Twitter when I think Ben Gessling wrote a strip piece about how not tagging Keenum meant that the Vikings were taking a big risk. And so every action that the Vikings take from here in regard to the quarterback situation is a big risk because everything is an unknown, right? They're not, I mean, they seemed pretty confident, right? The way that they acted that they were going to get Cousins, what with all the tampering that occurs at the combine. So maybe it actually wasn't very risky, but even so, tagging Keenum would have prevented them from going after the only quarterback to hit free agency since like Peyton Manning. And then before that, since like Drew Brees, like it happens like once every 7 years or something like that. But yeah, it's if they tagged Keenum, it would have been impossible to go after Cousins. If they let Keenum go, it would have been, it would have opened them to the possibility of not having a quarterback at all, which, is what they did. Every way that they could have gone this would have been risky because Keenum could have just been a one-year wonder, which is, I think, an opinion that the Vikings might just hold based on their actions. So, yeah, I think that every action was potentially risky. This one opens you up to the possibility that there's no quarterback, which is a problem. But I do think that they had some certainty that they were pretty far ahead in the Cousins race by the time they finished making a decision about whether or not to take Keenum. And even then, they've got fallbacks because I think if they couldn't get Keenum, right, or they just didn't want to pay him $18 million, they couldn't get Cousins, I think they actually would have taken a chance on Bridgewater. Would they have guaranteed him a starting job? Probably not. But they probably would have had like a competition of some sort. So yeah, I think that there are a lot of potential options that could be categorized as risky. I don't think any of them are so inherently more risky than others. In fact, I think the Vikings may have taken the safest path. They took a quarterback that has played to the talent level of the rest of the roster around him, and they got basically an assurance that he is going to be with them for a lot of money, and they let a bunch of high-risk, high-reward guys go, people like Keenum, Bradford, and Bridgewater. So, yeah, it's risky, but from certain perspectives, it's probably the safest thing they could have done.
Yeah. So obviously the Broncos have a lot of things to do outside of getting Case Keenum here. Boy, that offense was just miserable last year, and I don't know if that was necessarily a situation of the revolving door of quarterbacks that they had including the formerly most overpaid quarterback in the entire league, Brock Osweiler. But man, what do you do with that offense if you are Case Keenum? Like, you don't have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph to bail you out every time you throw at 6 inches higher than you should.
Emmanuel Sanders is like very close to that. I don't think Demaryius Thomas is. I mean, he's got an enormous wingspan, so he can kind of make up for the fact that, he's not as good at tracking the ball as Emmanuel Sanders. But, it's not a bad receiver core. Wow, I'm speaking a lot of backhanded compliments today. I'm not pessimistic about Kirk Cousins. Well, Denver doesn't have a bad receiver core. Sanders has got really good hands. And so if the ball's kind of in his general area code, he'll catch it. So, he's not going to have like the profound abilities that Diggs and Thielen kind of together have. But I mean, Thomas and Sanders are deadly in their own right. And the real question is whether or not Thomas can reel in those circus catches that'll sometimes happen because of Keenum. And, he's got the wingspan to do it. The question is whether or not, he's got, basically the basic pass catching talent, which, he might. So, yeah, he's not going to have that crutch to rely on, but it's not as if it's an enormous downgrade from the perspective of being able to reel in balls from like difficult, like contorted body angles. That said, they're not as good at getting separation, which is another element to what they've been able to do, kind of erase the inaccuracy problems that Keenum has. So that's, I think, going to be the bigger question.
And I suppose now we can talk about the heartache that is now involved with the loss of Teddy Bridgewater to the Jets for 1 year, $5 or $6 million, depending, with incentives.
I'm so sad.
It is sad, and a lot of people are taking this very, I say seriously, but taking this about as hard as you can. I mean, it's hard not to like the guy too. So,
right. I mean, there's been a lot of emotional investment in him. More from some people like me than others. But I mean, he's extremely likable. I mean, the Vikings kind of invested a lot. I mean, obviously Zimmer's very emotionally invested, and I think that made Vikings fans a lot more emotionally invested too. I mean, we can admit that, maybe the Vikings have a good degree of information that this is the best move from a football perspective, but it doesn't mean you can't be like sad about seeing someone that's really that likable, and who's really done nothing wrong, to leave. Right. I mean, cause there's likable players that you're kind of happy to see leave cause they're like bad. And when players are bad, very often you're like, well, I mean, it's his fault he's bad, so I can be okay, being happy that they leave. But I thought Bridgewater did well. A lot of people disagree, which I get, but generally speaking, people kind of understood he had a lot of potential. He's very young. And his leaving came after this very emotional 2-year journey to deal with an injury that he nearly lost his leg in. And I guess McCown was named the starter, which I found really surprising. I really thought Bridgewater was going to be able to find enough leverage to find somewhere where he could, get at least first consideration for a starting job, if not, the starting job. I guess we'll see. So the Jets aren't even out of it for a quarterback at number 6 is the weird thing. And so, this means they really hate Hackenberg, which is
clear at this point.
Yeah, right. It's not even close. But B, that's Teddy could get pushed to the 3rd quarterback on the depth chart. And man, I just want him to do well. A 1-year contract. If he doesn't get, the starting job and he gets to, and who's he throwing to? Like Devin Smith and Quincy Enunwa? Like Jesus. I is Jason Morrow still there? I have no idea. It's like I'm not happy. I want him to go to a situation that that's good for him, that has like some pretty good coaches. Not that like Bowles is a bad coach, but I don't think he's necessarily a good coach either. I'm sad. And it also is like an indication that the Vikings are not as confident in his knee,
right,
as it seemed like for a while. So, yeah, it sucks for me personally, and also for a lot of Vikings fans,
and for and theoretically for Teddy. But it is good that he's now in a situation where perhaps he can make it as the starter out there, being able to win a battle in training camp or something like that. It's not like they're putting a ton of money on him. That is basically I was kind of throwing around that's basically like the Keenum contract last year. Like here's a little bit of money. Let's just kind of keep you around and see what you got. And if you are able to do something, then you could be able to get a little bit more out of it. But yeah, it's too bad because he's just so likable and was such a picture here, and it's also sad that the first touchdown that was thrown in US Bank Stadium is now his only. Like, it's just
that's just so sad. Yeah, I saw Guessing published that piece, and I was like, yeah, right in the feels. Really?
But there are reports that he was asking for $10 million from Minnesota, and whether or not you believe that's a bit absurd considering
I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, it's a bit absurd considering what he ended up taking as well.
Well, I guess it's a question. If that's true, then it's a really big question about like the competency of his agents, because if his agents aren't tampering at the NFL Combine, what are they doing? They also should be, true. Right? They should get a feeling for what his market should look like, right? Yeah. And if they don't get an understanding of like, well, the Jets are willing to pay $5 to $6 million, the Cardinals are willing to pay, $4 to $5 million, I'm going to demand $10 million from the Vikings. Like, there's not a situation where that happens, right? The only situation is they don't know what his market is and they just put a number out there, and the Vikings just flat out said no or something. I really, and I would have said that that's too much, right? Like, and I'm, the most absurd, illogical Teddy Bridgewater fan out there, right? Like, I wouldn't have paid $10 million. Are you kidding me? Like, let's figure out if you can walk first. Like, good Lord. Yeah, but the $5 to $6 million, like if that's what they asked for from the Vikings, and it's a situation where the Vikings were like, well, in a vacuum, we'd pay you $5 to $6 million, but not if we can pay Kirk, 27, and we only want to have, one on the roster or something like that, and we want to have enough room to sign people for 2019, or hitting 2019 free agency. Then we have to let you go. Like, I get, like, that makes a little bit more sense. But if Bridgewater wanted $10 million and the starting job without competition, that's obviously too much. I just don't think that is true.
So Teddy ends up going to the Jets, and Sam Bradford has somehow convinced Arizona to give him $20 million.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that happened.
That's amazing. Like,
that's incredible.
That's the ate a wheel of cheese and pooped in the fridge situation. Like, I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Right. Like, it's. What are you doing, Cardinals? Like, did he really have that kind of money? Like, he got a raise, like, because he was getting 17 in Minnesota. He got a raise. How did he get a raise? He didn't even play this year. Like, I mean, you got the one game against the Saints. It's a pretty Hall of Fame worthy game, I guess. But
it was pretty good, admittedly.
Yeah, but what? Like, the issue with Bradford at this point in his career is clearly not the amount of talent that he has, because he's finally kind of proven that, this is the kind of guy that you pick first overall. The issue was the health of his knees, and it's kind of always been the issue with him. And so for him to like miss a season because of the health of his knees, I feel like that should impact things. If it's kind of structured like a lot of contracts are, like Richard Sherman's contract has this structure in it where he doesn't have a base salary. He's got like an inactive game bonus thing, which I mean, I don't want to talk about Richard Sherman's contract too much, but you really screwed yourself, dude. Yeah, it's like one of those things where this is the kind of money that's not protected for injury. Then, it's not going to be that impactful, but his cap number would still be pretty high, and it would still restrict them from being able to get a bunch of, deal signed or free agents or whatever, right? Like, and maybe they're not that interested, but like they clearly had cap problems because they had to let Tyrann Mathieu go. So what? Is he 20 million? Like, I would have maybe paid 14. I really thought this was like a Jake Long situation where you're like, yeah, we'll call you up in the middle of the year if we don't have any quarterbacks, but like, there's no way we're going to trust you for 16 games.
Nope. Arizona is going back to its time-tested principle of paying a quarterback an exorbitant amount of money and making sure they're near the end of their career. And, Bradford, even though he's younger, let's be honest, his knees have far more years on him than he does. So, yeah, they're just willing to go with it.
Yeah, it really helps the Vikings out. So the Cousins and Bradford contract cancel each other out in terms of the compensatory pick formula, which means that Keenum is a third-round compensatory pick, which is great. And you get what's the projection right now? A fifth from Jerick McKinnon. People are saying a sixth for both Teddy and Tremaine Brock. I imagine A, that the Vikings will sign more free agents and it's going to cancel stuff out, but B, that Brock's contract, once all the free agents are kind of filled out, Brock's contract is going to just drop off the bottom there.
Probably, yes.
And so you won't even get a seventh for him. But yeah, great.
So Jerick McKinnon is going to let's just wrap up with Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon is going to the 49ers, and that team is very interesting right now, even with Richard Sherman's interesting contract. Like, that team is poised for something.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. The team that was kind of on the cusp of going 0-16 trades for a quarterback. The quarterback won every game, right? Like, I think Jimmy Garoppolo won every start.
Yeah.
Has he? I don't think he's lost a game yet.
I'd have to check the New England stats, but I think you're right.
Yeah. So Garoppolo looks great. And then they add Jerick McKinnon. They still got Kyle Juszczyk. They add Richard Sherman. They re-signed Marquise Goodwin, I think. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do at receiver. But yeah, I mean that's definitely going to be a team worth watching because they're doing things really fast there, like in terms of just accelerating the amount of talent that they have on the roster.
A little bit interesting. I'm curious as to what happens from there. So that is
Still wasted that CJ Beathard pick though. That was terrible. What are you doing?
Yeah. Before we go to the mailbag, let's have a brief moment of silence for the loss of Jordy Nelson. He has been dropped by the Packers. And the Packers have picked up Jimmy Graham. I want to say in his stead, but we'll be picking up Jimmy Graham instead. So, Jordy Nelson gone. He's picked up a lot of interest across the board. Do you feel like Jordy Nelson is going to be one of those countless receivers from Green Bay that can only play when a Hall of Fame quarterback like Aaron Rodgers is throwing to them, or will he have success outside of Wisconsin?
I mean, I think 3 years ago he would have been a receiver that would have legitimately had success outside of Wisconsin, but he is so slow and he can't push off that knee. So he's not a great route runner at this point. So no, I don't think he'll succeed. I don't think he's got the talent anymore. I think he legitimately did. And the worst thing is, it's not the worst thing. The worst thing is that his career is over. But the second worst thing, the first person I thought of when it came to someone supremely talented that just dropped off in a big way after an injury was Eric Decker. Because of course I compared Jordy Nelson to Eric Decker. Who else is there to compare him to? Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened to Eric Decker when leaving the Jets for the Titans. He's just not the same player at all. And so, yeah, he's going to get a lot of interest. Some teams are going to overpay him and, good for him or whatever. But like he's not going to be good. And people are probably going to say, it's because, you had Aaron Rodgers throwing to you. But no, I mean, like Aaron Rodgers clearly preferred Jordy over a bunch of other receivers. And when Rodgers had to throw to like Devontae Adams instead before Devontae Adams suddenly got good, it was very frustrating. It didn't work out. Like Jordy Nelson clearly was individually talented. He just doesn't have it anymore.
Well, let's move off to the mailbag and Mike Ellis, who says the need for the Vikings to improve the O-line on the scale of 1 to 10, with 11 being the correct answer.
I mean, they don't have a lot of needs left, right? Everyone knew that they were going to fill out this quarterback thing. But, what else do they have to improve? They have to improve both guard spots and the defensive tackle spot, and I guess the slot corner spot. So, yeah, I mean, offensive line's a need, and given that you need 2 more offensive linemen as opposed to 1 defensive tackle, 1 nickel corner, yeah, it's at the top of the list. I mean, you could say they needed a guard and a tackle because they'll move Remmers inside, or maybe you could say they only need 1 guard because Joe Berger might not retire, and so you could just re-sign him for another year. But I mean, long term, you need another guard anyway, and I don't think Danny Isidore is the answer. So, yeah, you need 2 offensive linemen of some type, 1 who has the ability to start right away. So yeah, it's I guess I'd say it's like an 8, maybe not an 11, but yeah.
Zen Cupid asks, why do they always say don't let him leave till the ink dries? Doesn't ink dry in a matter of seconds? I gotta think only 2 minutes tops.
I think it's about signing the contract. I think you missed the point of that metaphor, Zen Cupid.
Is Zen Cupid Dave Bautista from the Guardians of the Galaxy? Metaphors go over his head.
Yeah. Except for the he broke character in the original Guardians of the Galaxy when he called Gamora a whore. It was clearly.
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, well, you didn't think that she actually had sex for money. It doesn't work. This doesn't work with your character, man.
I like how this is now delved into. Well, there was actually an inaccuracy as far as the character is concerned in the original movie. Now, let me take a minute to tell you why he was wrong.
In comics issue, 148.
Third panel, Sean E. Douglas asks, will players like Danielle Hunter walk away in free agency in future years because the team is cash-strapped from the Cousins deal? Basically asking, are we punishing ourselves from here on out?
I mean, so to answer the implied question, probably not, because, quarterbacks are worth more than any individual other non-quarterback player. And I know Zimmer made a bunch of statements about how you don't want to overpay a quarterback because, they got there with defense and all these players are good and whatever. But quarterbacks clearly matter more. I don't think Danielle Hunter is going to be kind of the quote unquote victim of this one unless he has a down year, in which case, then the Vikings might let him walk. But I even doubt it then. I think instead it'll be someone else. It'll be like Eric Kendricks or Trey Waynes. I think they'll prioritize people like Danielle Hunter or Anthony Barr, especially if Anthony Barr has another good year like he did this year, and Stephon Diggs. So, yeah, I mean, you could lose Danielle Hunter. I think you're more likely to lose, Kendricks or Waynes. And is that going to hurt the team? Yeah, it's going to hurt the team, but not I think devastatingly. So dropping from a top 2 defense to a top 7 defense is not amazing, but it's no one's gonna write letters, right? That's not bad.
It's probably not gonna reach a letter writing campaign right away anyway.
Yeah, well, presuming that Cousins can keep the Vikings in the top 10 in terms of offensive production. You got a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. Why are you mad?
Scott Brockett asks, do we let Latavius Murray walk and go after a late round running back to pair with Delvin Cook?
If the Vikings can find a way to secure more draft picks, so if they're comfortable trading down in the first round of the draft, if they've done so Rick does a bunch of mock drafts to I think probably more than most teams to try and figure out what the draft's going to look like. And that's very difficult when you're at 30. It's a lot easier when the Vikings were picking at 11 and 12. But 30, it's a lot more difficult. But to get an idea of kind of what the draft landscape looks like, if they want to target a guard or a defensive tackle in the first round, they need to be comfortable where if they trade down, say, to the bottom of the second round, that there's going to be a guard or a tackle available, and then they'll be able to pick up some extra picks, right? Look at like a fourth and another sixth and a seventh, all that. And then, I think they would be willing to target a running back. Unfortunately, they have to make a decision on Latavius Murray like way before they can do that. And so they have to be comfortable with the idea that this is a likely possibility. And I'm not sure that they are. Like, a lot of people are talking about restructuring Latavius Murray's contract. And like, I agree, like in the abstract, that would be a good thing. But I don't know that they have a ton of leverage to be able to do that. And I don't think they're just going to cut him because now they just don't have running backs. And then to go after a running back after you cut Latavius Murray, maybe it's going to be a guy you don't overpay, but it's probably going to be someone you don't like as much as Murray on your offense being paid less. Like, that's kind of the trade-off, even though Murray's kind of overpaid right now. So I don't think they cut him unless they get like an insurance from an FA they like. Like, I guess like Garrett Blunt's still out there, so if they like signed him, like buy Latavius. But besides
he's got a championship pedigree and a hell of a hook.
Probably more the second thing is interesting than the first thing. I'll be honest. But it's always nice to bring that kind of fighting form to the locker room. He's talked about clean cold. I mean, come on.
It was. I remember watching that game live and watching that shot and just going, wow, his NFL dreams went up in smoke, and how horribly I was wrong. Yeah,
right. It was pretty wrong. But I mean, he did get like way underdrafted because of it. So,
well, yes.
Did he go undrafted? I think he might have gone undrafted. Yeah. I don't remember anymore.
that doesn't matter anymore. It's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves with Latavius Murray, and I have a feeling that is going to play itself out very quickly here in the next few days. Question from Jason Trevade. Sure, let's go with Trevade. Jason Trevade asks, with Kirk Cousins throwing for over 4,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons in Washington, should Vikings fans be disappointed if he doesn't reach those benchmarks here with the Vikings? Why or why not?
I mean, no. I don't really care about volume statistics, and I will continue to not care about them if a quarterback does produce them for the Minnesota Vikings. It's really about, how effective his throws are, not how many throws he makes, because that's what 4,000 yards is built off of. I guess if you threw the ball 600 times and you didn't hit 4,000 yards, you're doing something like really wrong. But, for the most part, like if the Vikings are going to be run through, Dalvin Cook and LeGarrette Blount, let's say, and I don't know, Rashad Penny as actually that'd be pretty friggin' dynamic, as the receiving back. Then he's not going to get 400 passing attempts. Maybe he'll get 400, but he's not going to get like 500 if you're just going to run it through those 3 running backs. But he could be, throwing at like 8 yards an attempt and, helping win games and stuff like that. So, the unimportant stuff. Putting your team in a position to win, then I don't really care if he gets 4,000. I don't think it's a disappointment, nor do I think he would be underplaying his contract, because he would still be coming up big in situations like on 3rd and long or in the 2-minute drill. That would require only, a top tier quarterback to be able to do. And if he performs there, then that's fine. That's what you're paying $27 million for. You're not really paying for, the ability to pad your attempt total so you can hit 4,000 yards. You're paying more towards, high success rates, over 8 yards an attempt. If you get under 8 yards an attempt, or if you get under a certain touchdown, ratio, then you have to investigate like, well, was he at least as good, on 3rd and long as we needed him to be? Was he at least as good when we did throw it in the red zone that we needed him to be? And if the answer is no, then you should be disappointed. But I don't think there's a yardage marker that, we should tie this to, especially not 4,000. And if there's like a statistical marker we do tie it to, it would be just in net yards per attempt, but even that needs like some context, right? So no, I wouldn't say that you'd be disappointed.
Next question is from Paul Hegstead, who asks, who won free agency, the Vikings or the Packers?
The Packers probably got more interesting players, right? But I guess
the Packers
Vikings
lost their number one corner. Let's remember that, because it feels like a million things have happened. So they lost their number one corner. They picked up a quarterback. And
right, they did. Yeah. Oh, weird. Yeah.
This welcome to the episode where James's memory is better than Arif's.
I was like, I remember that they lost Demarius Randall, who was arguably the best performing corner last year. Although in the secondary, you would expect going forward that, Clinton Dix and Morgan Burnett are going to outperform him in the future. But yeah, they lost their best corner and their best performing player in the secondary. But in return, they got a better Brett Hundley.
That's really all you can ask for at this point. And they lost Jordy Nelson, but they picked up Jimmy Graham. That's
yeah. Well, didn't they get they got Muhammad Wilkerson too. That's not bad. It really depends on which Muhammad Wilkerson they got, because Justice Mosqueda, who we don't trust and don't like.
No.
But who's been breaking down defensive line play, and in particular 3-4 defensive ends for like the past year and the past couple of years, mostly for setting the edge and Bleacher Report. He independently had come up with opinions on Muhammad Wilkerson, and mostly that he's the supremely talented player that can do an extraordinary amount when given the motivation, and Wilkerson just didn't care. Last year, he said he didn't see a 3-4 DE take as many plays off as Wilkerson did. But if he's going to be paired with Mike Pettin again, who's formerly his defensive coordinator with the New York Jets, and Pettin can get him to care, and I feel like he probably will, then I think that's actually a pretty extraordinary signing. So you lose Demarius Randall, you gain, and you lose Jordy Nelson, who, again, I already mentioned just wasn't playing well. You gain Muhammad Wilkerson. You gain Jimmy Graham. I guess you gain Deshaun Kaiser. I think you come out ahead. I guess the Vikings had better free agency when you take into account the compensatory picks. But I mean, a lot of those are going to get canceled out when the Vikings sign more free agents. So I guess we'll see. If the Vikings only sign people that were cut, like Tyrann Mathieu, I guess they don't have to worry about that. But for the most part, I mean, don't expect the compensatory pick formula to hold where it is right now.
The free agent you just mentioned, Mathieu, is a very interesting idea, and it's something that people have mentioned as a possibility. What do you think he would look like in for the Vikings?
I mean, he didn't play like he played his first 2 years in Arizona, and so I think the first thing we have to remember is, we may not be getting the player that, is like the Pro Bowl quality player that he is. I think that, he would play primarily slot corner for the Vikings, which, I mean, that's where the opening is. But it's not as if you wouldn't move him to safety in a dire situation, or you wouldn't mix up a lot of looks where he drops back or he blitzes or whatever. Like, he's, very versatile. His biggest value for the Vikings would be at slot corner, and that's immensely valuable. So it's not like you'd be wasting his talents. I think one of the things that we get caught up on versatile players is how can we use the versatility instead of how can we use them best. And so you feel like you're wasting their talent by not having them play, another version of the position that they're best at. But honestly, if you can get the most value out of someone by playing them at one position that they play the best, it's like, are the Jaguars losing anything by not having Jalen Ramsey play safety? No, they're fine. I think the same thing would be true for Tyrann Mathieu. So that's what he would look like. He would be super interesting. I don't know that the Vikings are in a cap situation where, that's an easy get. But, I mean, if you plan on losing Trey Waynes anyway, then, it's something maybe you move Mac Alexander to the outside or, whatever, right? Like it's definitely an intriguing possibility. I just wouldn't say that Matthew's at the top of the Vikings list right now. I think they're really looking for value at this point after intentionally overpaying for a quarterback.
Next question is from Alex Goebel, who asks, is there any market at all for Laquan Treadwell? And if there is, why aren't we pouncing on this opportunity?
My guess is there's not much of a market. Then again, receivers are getting paid a lot. Like, like cornerbacks and tight ends and defensive tackles are not being paid as much as you'd expect in free agency, and like guards and receivers are. So, who knows? But I don't think that there's much. I think if there was, the Vikings would have moved. Would you rather have a 7th round pick or Laquan Treadwell? I mean, even I would probably say Laquan Treadwell. So yeah, it's probably, I don't think there's much.
No. I feel like if there was, we would have found a way to take care of it during the season last year. Ian Prague? Let's go with Prague. Has there been any movement on Tyler Eifert? I know he has the injury concerns, but he would fit perfectly. Plus, maybe he gets injured less as a tight end number 2.
There's no way he'd be tight end number 2. Like, Rudolph is paid a lot, and I know that, like, you bag on Rudolph too much, Arif, which I think Andy bags on him way more than I do.
That's not like, that. You can't just use that as, well, I don't do it as much as this guy does, but.
Okay, you're right. That's fair. I don't really bag on him too much. Rudolph is an average tight end that gets paid more than an average tight end does. That's fine. Eifert is like an elite tight end. Like, he would be starting. What do you mean tight end number 2? No, they're not going to go after Eifert.
For some reason, I just envision Gronk up and deciding he just wants to spend the rest of his days drinking, and the Patriots going, well, let's grab Eifert then.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking about retiring. We've got another injury-prone tight end to replace you.
Let's just do that. Kenneth Allen asks, assuming the reported numbers are accurate, do you think that Cousins for $10 million more than Case is worth it to the Vikings? I.e., is he really that much better, more consistent, etc.?
Yes and no. The problem with the way that we price out these contracts is that as you move up in money, you're paying for less and less. And so there's not like an amount of talent that you get for $1 million. You don't get twice that much talent for 2, right? You get like maybe 1.5 times. You're paying for it because the issue is that you don't get to like double productivity, right? With this is the Gladiators versus Bricklayers thing where this was originally laid out in an advanced football stats blog. It used to be called Advanced NFL Stats, whatever. Brian Burke, who currently works for ESPN, wrote a blog a while back, and he pointed this out, that the economics of the free agency market are not such that a $2 million player is worth twice as much as a $1 million player. And the simplest way to put it is that a lot of jobs are like bricklayers, where if you pay one bricklayer a certain amount and you pay an equally talented bricklayer the same amount, you can employ both of them and get twice as much done. But NFL players are much more like gladiators, where they have to compete directly against each other, and the one who is marginally better, 10% better, is going to win many more than like maybe 10% of the time, much more than 10% of the time. And because like it's gladiators, like the other one dies, right? So this other 10% more talented gladiator is worth way more than 10% more because he's going to win, right? And so, which is the goal, right? And so you'll pay him like twice as much, right? And so because you can't put like 30 football players on the field, because I mean, the stupid rules prevent you from doing that.
Damn you, NFL.
Your only restriction is not the cap. Your restriction also is your roster limit and the amount of spots you have on the field. You can only have like 5 eligible receivers, right? And so if you pay 5 receivers $2 million, you're going to improve a lot by paying one receiver $10 million, even if that one receiver is not worth 5 times as much as, is not 5 times better than one of those receivers. And so to say Cousins is $10 million better than Keenum it's like a difficult thing to answer, right? Because he's not, 33% better. Like, let's assume Cousins is paid like $30 million just to make this easier, and Keenum was paid $20 million. He's not 33% better than Keenum, and actually maybe he is, because I don't really think Keenum's all that great. But he's better by a significant enough margin that you would replace one with the other without, I think, hesitation. So is he worth $10 million more? I think, given kind of the context of you can only have one quarterback on the field and the better quarterback very often wins. I guess. Again, I think Keenum was only a little bit overpaid and Cousins was a lot overpaid. So you maybe not 10 million more, maybe 6 million more, maybe 8 million more.
Within a margin.
Yeah, right. It's not enough for me to be like, well, you could have had Keenum for cheaper. Like, that's not how I think about this at all.
No. Also from Kenneth Allen, given that this is the Vikings, how will the unprecedented, fully guaranteed contract for Cousins backfire? Will he explode a la Teddy? Simply suck like McNabb? Or some other novel form of cruel universal irony? I love this question. And I'm the one who's been saying that he's going to twist his ankle or destroy his ACL on the ice outside of Manny's, which, by the way, people of downtown Minneapolis, please spread as much like salt and like cat litter and whatever things you can like in that like whole area just to make sure there's no chance of that happening.
Yeah. There's got to be a new way, right? Like, it can't be the castle slipping on a bath mat in Buffalo?
Yeah, there was the bath mat in the shower mat. In Buffalo.
Right.
That was pretty
new. It's not going to be the spontaneous knee explosion because that just happened to Teddy.
It's not going to be the Geno Smith getting his jaw destroyed. That's likely not going to be the situation.
Right. Plus, I mean, Geno stiffed Ake and Impali on like a
fair amount of money.
On like showing up. Well, there
was money, and then there was the camp. His camp was the bigger issue. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You disappoint kids, you get your jaw wired. It's just it's just the rule in the NFL.
I don't think that's going to be a thing with Cousins, especially the money part of it. Like, I think he'll find a way to pay you back, especially because he's like living with his in-laws or whatever, right? So he's fine.
I just wanted to come out that like so the actor Michael B. Jordan is it that he lives with his parents? Is that the thing? Like, I just wanted to come out that I've just been putting all of this money away. Like, I've been just living with my parents. Campbell's anyone? Like,
you're right.
I'm actually the most frugal guy on the planet.
We sprung for chunky. I know. It was, an impulse purchase.
Yeah, I was going for the Our Family brand, but they insisted on the chunky.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you seen that?
By the way,
commercial? The Our Family stuff. Have you seen that commercial with Kirk Cousins for, I think, Ally Bank?
Yes, I have.
Oh, good Lord.
That was a thing of beauty. That was Super Bowl week. That was fantastic. Boy, how does this contract blow up in our faces?
Yeah, so it has to be something new, and for bonus points, something like very poetic to Kirk Cousins, which I can't actually
breaks
think of anything.
His hand writing a check.
Yeah, maybe. The thing is, the only personality trait that stuck out to me about Kirk Cousins, aside from the fact that he's very pleasantly bland, is the "you like that" thing, which is like, I mean, he's like,
you're not wrong. It's just
he's like brand name cottage cheese, right? Like, homemade cottage cheese is really delicious, and generic brand cottage cheese is just terrible. But like, brand name cottage cheese is like pleasant bland, right?
He's the unfrosted Pop-Tart of quarterbacks.
Oh yeah, see, there you go.
Yeah,
not even buttered.
Not buttered, and he's not he's above the, again, I'm picking on them, the Our Family version. I assume there's an Our Family version of this, or Flavor Right or whatever. Pleasantly bland. Really, really like that. Maybe it turns out that he's like married 4 times, and it catches up to him now, and his response is that, well, I liked that too much. That was how that happened.
It's terrible. I figured it out.
Oh.
So he still drives his old 2000 car or van. I think it might be a van. He still drives the van that he got in like before college. Which, by the way, because his official residence is in Michigan and Minnesota has a reciprocity agreement with both Michigan and North Dakota.
Sure do.
He pays Michigan income tax in Minnesota, so props, dude. But he's really got a financial, like, those Ally Bank people really got to him. But Yeah, his car breaks down, and maybe it's a crash and that causes an injury, or maybe he it's something legal happens because of it. It's like a very non-scandalous legal thing, right? If your car breaks down on the highway, the cops I think can arrest you for that, which is dumb, but whatever. Something, right? Or something related to his car breaking down, like maybe it just stops in the middle of an intersection, and that would be the most Vikings / Cousins way for this to blow up. And because it's fully guaranteed, you're on the hook.
So some breaking news has come in over the last few minutes that we should probably mention about Teddy Bridgewater. No, his knee is fine. The reports coming out.
You gotta be careful with breaking news, dude.
I'm well aware. Also, it should be mentioned, if we're doing the breaking news bit once again, that the offensive coordinator from New England is still the offensive coordinator for New England, and the Colts head coach is still the Colts head coach. But the Teddy Bridgewater's deal is a 1-year deal with the Jets for up to $15 million. I would be really curious to see how that thing is structured. I can only imagine that, it's on that elevator of, okay, so you've started 4 games. Here's a few extra million.
Well, okay, so I imagine that, there's $2 million for if you're the starter of the Super Bowl and we win. And there's $2 million for All Pro and $2 million for Pro Bowl. And then there's a bunch of playtime incentives, which that was $6 million I just carved out. Then there's $4 to $5 million in playtime incentives for starting or whatever. And then there's the base below it that's guaranteed. So, there's a lot of up to involved, right? I doubt he makes the All Pro team and starts and wins in the Super Bowl. So it's something. Oh, good on him. James Roberts, your top free agent targets you would like to see the Vikings go after, assuming the Cousins deal goes through. There has been a little bit of talk over the last, I want to say, hour or two about, I believe it's Sheldon Richardson. The Vikings have reached out to him. Yeah, Tom Pelissero tweeted out that he doesn't expect the Vikings to make any more big moves, but they have reached out to Sheldon Richardson. The Seahawks are interested in keeping Richardson. I guess it kind of depends on what his experience in Seattle was like. But yeah, that's the 2 moves they get to make in free agency if that's what happens. It's we did 2 things in free agency. We signed Kirk Cousins and we signed Sheldon Richardson, and wow, we're out of money. That's great. Looking forward to the draft, guys.
Funny how that works. Between James and Arif, who would be the highest priced as the useful human free agent? I like to think that I'm the Bradford of this particular situation, and that I find a way to fleece a place despite my age and despite my numerous injuries and throwing my back out last week. That was fun.
Jesus.
It was great because I threw my back out and then I immediately got food poisoning. So I was just the most miserable human being on the planet for a good week, and I'm still not completely over it. It's just
there's an Adrian Peterson, John Sullivan element to this too. Then
yeah, pretty much.
And I just kept eating the shrimp. I don't.
It's all of a sudden it's a poo going. I'm not going to do the accent, but poo going. Here, have some shrimp. Sure. What could possibly go wrong? No, I would be comparatively, I would be the Bradford in this situation, and with my skill set, I would find a team somewhere warm and fleece them for all the money they could potentially give me.
I like the idea of being the Drew Brees, A, because that makes me a Hall of Famer, but B, because I took way too much of a discount to stay at home.
You're I don't really want to leave. I don't.
Right, yeah.
I've and
a lot of work.
All my stuff is here.
Man, I just, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I just moved the other half of our stuff. So we moved to this place in Uptown a month ago, and we left the other stuff at the house because we weren't going to be able to renovate it for a month. Now we're about to renovate it so that we can sell it. And so I moved the other half of the stuff, and man, that sucks. I am against moving ever again.
Yeah, moving is the worst. I'm about to re-up my lease simply due to like laziness at this point.
Yeah, right.
Like,
so stay tuned to North Code for more insightful commentary like moving sucks and we are lazy.
We're actually going to do a companion podcast to this where we're just going to make fun of the Property Brothers. It's going to be fantastic.
I really feel like they could have played receiver if they weren't Canadian. Both of them are like 6'4".
They are. And I have a job herding butterflies, and he has a job, let's say, screaming at a wall all day. Our budget is $8.2 million. We want it both rustic, new, and with a cat door.
All right, this first house is way out of your price range. You should know that, but you won't.
That is what we need to start doing, is just doing companion podcasts to episodes of the Property Brothers. That'd be great.
It can be like that West Wing podcast that rewatches every episode of the West Wing, except for us, it's the Property Brothers, and somehow we have new content.
This is what we're reduced to in the off season. We're gonna have the most amazing April Fool's Day episode. Don from Ohio asks, why would the Vikings leave Remmers at offensive guard when they tenured Easton and want to bring back Berger?
I mean, because Easton's not good. I mean, yeah, okay, they tender Easton and you get to pay him only like $2 million. But I mean, as a backup, right? So, Remmers is better than Easton at guard, but the difference there is smaller than, I guess, Rashad Hill versus Remmers at tackle, which, maybe not. But yeah, it's just about the fact that Easton hasn't been that great, but is a quality backup. And that's why you tender him. So yeah, the guard is still a need. Remmers evidently can also play guard. That's it. That's why. If you can get a tackle in the draft, if you get a guard in the draft, then Remmers is back at tackle. My sense is that the Vikings are making that decision based on what's available to them in the draft.
Next question is also from Don from Ohio, who asks, name me a worse dinner than an Irish jig dinner. Irish jig, of course, being the corned beef brisket, potatoes, carrots, cabbage, and onions, and just a bunch of stuff in a pot and boiled with water for a very long time.
I just feel like the island just got over this, they boil everything. The islands just got over the they boil everything problem. Mm. And for us to just rudely bring it back, you can't do that. Come on. If you boiled it in like a beef broth, that would be delicious. So long as you didn't actually boil it and you stewed it. Actually, don't boil it.
Yeah. I actually prefer corned beef brisket to regular beef brisket. And so the brisket that I've been making for a while now in the crock pot is a corned beef brisket, and I tend to put potatoes and onions in it to cook after a period of time, but it doesn't go full Irish boiled. I'm not willing to go to that extent. Just not.
Yeah, we are going to make homemade chicken stock in the next couple of days. And that involves like 10 seconds of boiling and then like hours of simmering. So yes. I'm excited about that.
I just want my house to just smell of all the fragrant.
Right.
Fantastic. Final question, and I feel it's the most important one, is what is the best Girl Scout cookie?
Okay, I think objectively it's probably Thin Mint, but that's not my favorite. Right? Like, I feel like the answer should just be Thin Mint.
It should be frozen Thin Mint is what it should be.
Yeah. That's part of we've got them in our freezer right now.
Yes.
Obviously. Is there any other way to enjoy them? But I personally prefer the peanut butter patties / they're tagalongs, right?
Yes.
So those are, I think those are clearly the winner for me.
Are they called Samoas or are they called Caramel Delights? I can't remember.
Well, both. So here's the thing, which I find I looked this up because of course I did. 2 different companies produced the Girl Scout cookies, and they call those things different things. And they package them at the bakery / factory that they make those Girl Scout cookies in. And it might even be this weird licensing thing. I'm not sure. But that's the reason Samoans and Caramel Delights are the same thing but called different things. And that's the reason peanut butter patties and tagalongs are like the same thing, but they're called different things.
I just remember that I once won a girl's heart by buying a table of her friends and her a bunch of Girl Scout cookie shots, the Thin Mint shot, which was if I remember correctly, let me put my dusty hat on for a moment. This was a half shot of Kahlua, half shot of Bailey's, and a half shot of peppermint schnapps. And it is delicious. And it's got just enough of the coffee, like the chocolate flavor on it, where it's amazing. So I remember that being that got me in a relationship for a very long time. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have bought the shot, but it worked fairly well, and it was quite delicious. So if you find yourself at a bar debating a drink and are still in the Girl Scout season, Girl Scout cookie season rather, half shot of Kahlua, half shot of Bailey's, half shot of peppermint schnapps. Really tasty.
Yeah, I'll take that to heart. That sounds delicious.
Yeah, it's. I don't have very many drink recommendations, but that is one of them, and it is quite delicious. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug for us? I imagine you'll be working hard on the Kirk Cousins research front.
Yeah, it'll be a Kirk Cousins piece. Probably some 4,000 unbearable words. And at some point, I'll end up breaking down the DiFilippo offense as well. Some of it is going to end up being in the training camp guide that I put out every year, so you're just going to have to wait for that. And
you bastard.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. But yeah, some of it's just going to be a piece. I've also currently have under the radar free agents that the Vikings could pursue, people that generally meet what the Vikings look for in their acquisitions. I've looked at, their history of free agent acquisitions over the past 4 years to try and get a sense of what they look like. And those are pretty extensive. I've got every position covered over at zonecoverage.com.
Excellent. So if you have enjoyed the show and you would like to donate to the show, you can do it in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/NorseCode, and that will go directly to us. And you can also go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. That is more of a sustaining member thing, like an NPR membership. It helps being a sustaining member, helps us keep the lights on, helps us kind of figure out what we're going to be doing here in the off season. We are planning on doing a potential live show in the over the summer near the training camp months, as well as a few other cool things. So keep listening for that. We do appreciate all the support you guys have given us over the years, and we look forward to being the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. So, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening, and continue to demand excellence. Demand Norse Code.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pogachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono, or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, We hit people in the mouth.